So we live in Alaska, and our schools have a seventh grade camping trip and an eighth grade survival trip that they send these kids on. And the seventh grade trip is kind of like a dry run to help the kids figure out whether they should be doing the eighth grade trip or not. In the eighth grade trip, they actually go camp on a beach away from town for 3 days, and they go with they get their backpack with their food, with their clothes, but their survival portion of their trip is that everything has to fit within a 1 pound coffee can. And they have to live out of that 1 pound coffee can for either 1, 2, or 3 days, depending on which group they sign up for. So anyway, my daughter's not the survivalist type, so she goes on the seventh grade camping trip, and she had a great experience with socialism. So she went with her camping partner, and they're in a larger group of 15 kids, and they're under adult supervision. So there's like 6 chaperones for 15 kids, because that's how many parents volunteered to go, because they didn't want their kid to not be chaperoned. But that's a whole other story. But in this particular story, my daughter goes camping, and I try to prep her for what she needs and doesn't need. And I give her the influence of warmth, comfort, and dryness are your 3 biggest issues. You know, being able to stay warm, dry, and not miserable, basically. And the food thing will kind of take care of itself. I said they're not going to let you starve. There'll be plenty of food. Everybody else will bring too much food, but they won't bring the other stuff that they need. They'll all be thinking about food. And still, you have enough calories for 3 days, so don't worry about it. So on the first night they camp, and it's a 3-day trip. The first night they camp, they set up camp, and all the kids are looking around at each other's campsites. And my daughter brought a full-size air mattress, a lightweight one, but it was just a cheap air mattress that doesn't weigh a lot, but it's a decent sized air mattress that fit the floor of the tent. And the tent was a 4-season waterproof North Face tent. I bought it about 18 years ago, and I looked online, and they sell now for like $650, $750 now. But anyway, it's top of the line tent, and her sleeping bag is just a basic sleeping bag that's good for the time of year. And it's made from a type that will keep you warm. When it gets soaking wet, it'll still keep you warm. So she's got her situation under control. But all the other kids didn't have good tents. And none of the other kids brought an air mattress. So they all agree on the second night, and they're spending 2 nights and 3 days. On the second night, they decide to socialize everything. So that means that one of the kids had brought a really big tent, that 2 people in a 10-person tent is one of those cheap tents that just says sleeps a lot of people. It's not waterproof, and it's a stand-up inside it tent, so you got to heat a whole bunch of additional air to keep it warm. So they decide to have the big sleepover party. And it's pouring down rain. So what you get is a socialized situation where everybody shares the misery. You all sleep in a wet tent. You all are cold because the space is too big to heat up. And she was the only one that had an air mattress. So she got up to go to the bathroom, and she came back, and she didn't have a spot on her own air mattress. Because just like in Russia, if somebody likes your apartment, they're going to do something to get you out of it, and then they're going to take your apartment. So she lost her place to sleep. She lost her tent, because everybody took their tents down, and they all agreed to sleep in the same tent. So they were all pretty much equally miserable and cold and wet. And she got to experience what it's like to have equal suffering, rather than staying with what she had. And it's funny how the kid with the worst tent thinks this is the greatest idea. And unfortunately, the kid with the best tent just gets swept along for the ride. But the same thing happens with the food. They socialize the food, and you brought stuff that was easy to cook, and everybody ate all that first, and then you got to do all the dishes because nobody else brought soap. And every step of the way, the most prepared kid winds up getting the crappiest situation, and the least prepared kid gets to coast on the backs of everybody else. And the person that's least willing to go gather firewood gets to sit by the fire and be warm and live off of the hard work of others. It was a great exposure for my daughter to get to see what socialism looks like firsthand. And the resentment that you'll have for taking, that one group will have towards another for taking care of themselves. Anyway, I thought it was a good learning experience for her. I don't know that she's going to do the 8th grade survival trip now that she's been on this adventure, but she's got a year to think about it and rethink her friendships and rethink who to partner up with, and to pick a partner that you can stay in agreement with and have a plan before you go, and to make sure that you don't sign up for somebody else's dumb idea that came by through committee. You know, the whole idea of everything by committee. Let's vote on it. Okay, everybody with a wet tent, put your hand up. Okay, you 2 people that had a dry tent, you're sleeping with us. It was just comical to hear her share the story, and then after I gave her the socialism talk, she was like, screw socialism. Anyway, very enlightening weekend for my daughter. I'll post this up, and hopefully somebody else can have a good laugh.